today's presentation on how to make your website ADA compliant. The American Disabilities Act mandates equal accessibility to certain elements in the physical world for persons with disability, and there are now requirements that are for the online world on websites. I won't steal too much of the presentation thunder, but there was recently, last week, a lawsuit that came down that had some medical website implications for how do people with disabilities reorder their prescriptions online, as so many things are going more and more to the web. And that is what the topic is going to be about. Our speaker is Matt Weber. He also happens to be my boss, but nonetheless, I'll read his regular bio in that regard. He has an extensive background in marketing for more than 30 years of experience in nearly every marketing medium. At Roar Internet Marketing, he and his team use direct marketing principles with the latest in web development technology to create websites and internet strategies for medical clients all over the country. Roar is known for applying a unique direct marketing perspective to web design and internet marketing. Matt is certified Google AdWords individual and a sought-after international trainer in Google AdWords and Google Analytics. Matt has taught thousands of individuals, agencies, and business owners how to use Google AdWords in dozens of cities across North America. People also benefit from Matt's experience in listening to the popular podcast Search Talk Live, which Matt co-hosts each Tuesday. His company, Roar Internet Marketing, routinely achieves conversion rates for Google AdWords that are twice as high as the national average. And Matt is also the inventor of Smilelytics, a new platform that translates website performance data into enjoyable and easy-to-read photographs. Roar Internet Marketing is a Google certified partner and is a member of the Digital Analytics Association, and of course we're members of MOROF. Matt currently is a trustee for the Orlando Museum of Art, serves as a member of the Seminole County Public School Business Advisory Board, and is a member of the Board of Trustees for Florida Virtual Schools. Give a warm welcome for Matt Weber.
Good morning, everyone. I also want to introduce two very special guests that are joining us this morning, Ramsey Spencer and Mike Fox from the Lighthouse, and they'll be working with me in this presentation. 1990 was a very significant year in civil rights in this country. It doesn't stick in our memories like 1964 does, but in 1990, we passed a landmark piece of legislation called the American Disability Act, which gave civil rights to a very valuable segment of our society, people with disabilities. And while the law itself is huge and voluminous, it really comes down to one small paragraph that says no individual shall be discriminated against on the basis of disability in the full and equal enjoyment of the goods, services, facilities, privileges, advantages, or accommodations of any place of public accommodation by any person who owns, leases, or leases to, or operates a place of public accommodation. Just that simple. Now, from that law gave growth to a lot of local ordinance, building codes, which gave access for people with disabilities to restaurants, businesses, commerce. And then I think we know what happened in the past decade. In the past decade, a lot of that business and a lot of that commerce moved to the internet. So that same access that people with disabilities enjoyed in the physical world now looks like this to them when they go to the internet. The small irony we live with today is it's now easier for a person with sighted disability to shop physically in Walmart than it is for them to shop online at Walmart, which then has raised a legal question. And the question has become, if we go back to the American Disabilities Act, is a website a place of public accommodation under the law? And the civil courts have been trying to figure this out. In 2016 alone, there were over 200 class action lawsuits against some very big brands that we're familiar with. And 2016 ended with what we call a split circuit, meaning some of the circuit courts ruled that, yes, websites are places of public accommodations and therefore fall under the ADA. And some circuit courts ended up with, no, they are not. But we took a significant turn just last week when the very first of these that actually went to a full trial concluded just last week here in our own circuit court. And Winn-Dixie lost. lost a suit by a gentleman who was not able to fill his prescriptions online through their website. And in looking at the judge's decision, I pulled out just a couple statements. The judge said, the factual findings demonstrate that Winn-Dixie's website is inaccessible to visually impaired individuals who must use screen reader software. And the judge clarified even further that Winn-Dixie has violated the ADA because the inaccessibility of its website has denied Gil, the plaintiff in this case, the full and equal enjoyment of the goods, services, facilities, privileges, advantages, or accommodations that Winn-Dixie offers to its general customers. So in general, the outcome of this case is saying if a person that didn't have a sighted disability can enjoy certain things from Winn-Dixie and a person with sighted disabilities can't, they are therefore discriminating under the ADA. Now, the plaintiff did not win any money in this suit, which should be of interest because this same plaintiff has 67 lawsuits currently filed today against other institutions. But the court did order Winn-Dixie to alter its website to become compliant, which expert testimony in the trial said would cost around $25,000 to $30,000. But what is compliant? How do you make your website compliant under the ADA? Well, fortunately, there is a set of guidelines, and they're called Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And they were put together by an organization that plays a very important role in your life, although you've probably never heard about them, the World Wide Web Consortium. The World Wide Web Consortium is a nonprofit international agency that created the very first standards about how web content should be produced. If it wasn't for the work of the World Wide Web Consortium way back in the early days of the internet, we would live in a world with Betamax websites and VHS browsers and VHS websites and Betamax browsers. If that analogy didn't make sense to you, see me after the program. But the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines is a set of technical standards as to how websites have to display. And I'm not going to go into the technical portion of it because there's not enough coffee in this room to keep you awake for that. But what I am going to go through is, what does it look like? What does it look like when a website is compliant and when it's not compliant? Before I do that, though, I want to introduce a topic called Section 508, which is often confused with WCAG. Section 508 is an existing statute. So we have some statutory law here as opposed to the case law that we've been talking about with WCAG. And Section 508 is an existing amendment to the United States Workforce Rehabilitation Act, and it does mandate that all electronic and information technology developed, procured, maintained, or used by the federal government has to be accessible to people with disabilities. So any work you do with the federal government or on behalf of the federal government has to today, with 100% clarity, be compliant with these guidelines. Now, the WCAG basically takes all of their technical standards and says, in general, there's 4 big categories. All of your content has to be perceivable to someone with a disability. It has to be operable. It has to be understandable. And it has to be robust. And I want to highlight this one to you because in the few conversations we've had, there's a kind of a reflex for people to say, wow, if I've got this form on my website and people with a sighted disability, I'd have to pay some money to convert it. I just won't offer that form to people with sighted disabilities. And that you cannot do. You have to offer an equal experience to people with sighted disabilities as you do with people without sighted disabilities. So let's take a look at what this might look like. So here's a website, and as you all look at that, it's very clear to you what to do on those buttons because you can read them. A person with sighted disabilities is going to rely not on what you see, but is going to rely on what you can't see. It's going to rely on what's in the code, and that's what the screen reader software reads. It doesn't read that, doesn't understand that. It reads this. And if you look closely, you'll see that the developer called those 4 buttons Link 1, Link 2, Link 3, and Link 4. So when the screen reader software comes across that, it says Link 1, Link 2, Link 3, and link 4. So the person with a sighted disability does not know what button to click on to get to the next content. Now, if we look at another website, similar 4 buttons, but this one has been done correctly, we'll look at those same buttons, and you can see that they've been given text descriptions in the code, so the screen reader software will tell the person what it is. Now, Mike has been gracious enough here to volunteer to demonstrate screen reader software. And Mike is using a screen reader software called NVDA. And what Mike is going to do for you right now is Mike has this website up, and he's going to turn on the screen reader software, and I'm going to ask you to pay very close attention, because even though Mike has slowed it down considerably, you're going to want to lean in and listen to what a sighted person is going to experience when they go through this first website. Mike?
407-423-1234. Visited link index. 407. Hablemos español. Blank. Clickable sub-menu link select language. 321. Brevard. Dot. Navigation landmark nav blank. Visited link locations. Blank. Link physicians. Blank. Visited link management. Blank. Link patient education. Link appointment request. Visited link insurance plans. Visited link directions. Out of list complete foot and ankle care. Orlando foot list with 4 items link about us. Visited link locations. Link our services. Link physicians. Out of list link make an appointment. Welcome to our practice. If our practice. Foot and ankle clinic is your one-stop shop for one of the goals of our site is to
Want to read the text? Make perfect sense to you, right? Now let's take a look at what the screen reader software sounds like when it reads a website that's been partially optimized.
vascular vein centers varicose. Visited link graphic vascular vein centers. Clickable find a VVC office near you. Visited link or view all locations. Edit. Edit enter zip code. Link E. Clickable schedule an appointment. Link 407-781. My legs feel 20. Navigation landmark list with 4 items common signs of vein disease link. Learn about our treatments link. Benefits of vein treatment link. What to expect from your...
Okay. You see how in the second example, it was more explanatory for the screen reader software? Now, Mike is an expert at this, by the way, and what I want to share with you, Mike, I'm going to ask you to turn the speed up to how you would use that software if you weren't doing a demo for people like us who aren't familiar with it. Let me know when you're ready. Ready?
Voice Microsoft 0. Volume 100. Pitch 50. Rate 50. Rate 70. Rate 80. Rate 80. Rate 90. Vascular vein centers, varicose and spider vein treatment in Orlando, Mozilla Firefox. Out of this complimentary landmark frame, clickable button. Watch on www.youtube.com link. Out of frame more about Dr. Martin link. Complimentary landmark navigation landmark list with 6 items active lifestyle link. Age link. Mental link. Obesity, pregnancy link. Risky professions link. Out of list more about risk factors link.
Everybody got that? That's what it sounds like to people like Mike who are accomplished using screen reader software. So you can see the clarity is even more important for them because they've got to use it at a speed faster than we were demoing it originally. Mike and Spencer, thank you so much. Ramsey, thank you much. Mike? So let's take a look at some other common examples that you see on websites that may not be compliant. Here's a website that starts off with a video at the very beginning. Clearly, someone with an audio disability, a hearing disability, is not going to be able to understand that content. Now, YouTube does offer automatic captioning. For those of you who have never experimented with YouTube's automatic captioning, it's hilarious, and there are a lot of examples online of how the automatic captioning gets it wrong. Very similar to the technology in your iPhone that automatically transcribes your messages, not 100% accurate, right? So you can't rely on that automatic captioning. So having this would mean that you would have to put in your own closed captioning if you wanted that video to be a dominant part of your website. This is called nested tables, and at some point you've been near a website where you had an option, and underneath the option was sub-options, but you couldn't see them until you rolled over them, until you clicked on them, called nested tables. Now, to a screen reader software, it doesn't know to click on this to be able to introduce the other options, so you're concealing the other options from someone with a sighted disability. That would not be compliant. So I think even as a fully sighted person, you would struggle to read this, right? So as someone who has even a partial sighted disability would struggle to read the contrast on this layout. So this too would not be compliant under the WCAG. A common technique in a site that's been done for WCAG is to have something called skip link buttons. When you go to a website, it's typically the same navigation across the top or across the bottom, right? Now imagine you've gotten to your 4th or 5th page and the screen reader software is reading that each and every time you load a page. That's going to become annoying. So when a site is WCAG compliant, it has a button in the code that says skip link buttons. So you can skip all of that and go right to the content of the website that you want to read on that. If you're looking for a relatively simple, easy, at-home test to see where your website stands mildly in the beginning for WCAG, call up your website on a desktop computer and hit the tab button and watch what the cursor does. If it has been thought through from a WCAG standpoint, the cursor should follow some logical path around the content. If the cursor does not move at all, or if the movement of the cursor is random when you hit the tab bar, you'll know that your site is not close to being WCAG compliant. And of course, we all struggle with these, right? These frustrate all of us. You can imagine what this is for a visually impaired person. Now, most of these do have an option, and what that will do is that will have a voice that will read off some numbers on that, but even that is a frustrating element for people with disabilities. Here's a quick quiz for you all. What's wrong with this website? Why would this be challenging to a screen reader software? Can't read it, but it's what, I'm sorry? Faint, and I'll give you a hint. This gives it away right here. Yeah, it's a graphic. It's just a picture. There's no letters on here. There's no letters at all here, and there's no letters at all here. So the screen reader software has absolutely nothing to look at. And what I find ironic here, this is from a local Orlando eye doctor, and he's given the option to accommodate multiple languages, but he hasn't given the option to accommodate people with visual disabilities. Now this is a common technique too. You've seen some forms on website, and when you click in the box on the form, this guide, or what we call ghost text, goes away. So if it goes away, what does that look like to the screen reader? It looks like 4, 5 empty boxes. So it doesn't know where you want to type the name, where you want to type the phone number. And then if that's compounded by the fact that if there's any validation here, if you put in content that's not a phone number, a series of numbers, if you typed a name here, then the form will reject it. The screen reader software doesn't know that the form's been rejected because you typed the wrong thing into the box. So what should you do next on the basis of this? The first thing to do is to get a WCAG compliance audit and checklist. Anybody right now should find out how far they are away from being WCAG compliant. This is an issue that is anywhere from months to maybe a year in front of us, so you should find out how far do you need to go when that day hits. And there are some who argue, based on the Winn-Dixie case, that the day is already here. It's already come. So we're just, at this point, playing the risk card. Are we going to get sued or not sued? Because it's a case law issue. It's not a statutory issue at this point. The second thing is to start making changes slowly, to be able to show good faith effort. And there's another interesting element here, is that you already have an entity who has a visual disability that is relying on your website heavily today. Does anybody know who that is? It's Google, right? So many of the things that we've talked about today that we would do to be able to make screen reader software be able to navigate a website are the same things we should be doing already to have Google, which is a bot, it's a piece of software, understand our website content. So if your site has been properly optimized for search engine optimization, it's a good chance that you are very close or closer to being WCAG compliant. So you get a benefit a monetary benefit of doing this in addition to the compliance issue that we've talked about in this presentation. And I think if you're taking Medicaid or Medicare payments, this ought to get front burner and should be accelerated, because even though Section 508 says it's technology on behalf of or procured by the federal government, it seems like that's a very small step away from that. If you're providing a service that is paid for by federal government funds, that Section 508 could be applicable. That seems like a really short distance to me. So if I took those kind of funds, I would definitely accelerate those plans. So in total, this is nothing new for a lot of folks. We do this in the physical world all of the time, and we as a society have benefited greatly from the changes we've made in the physical world to accommodate people with disabilities. We will reap the same benefit by making the internet as accessible to people with disabilities. And I think we have some time left for questions if there's any.
And if you can please wait for the microphone to come to you, that way we can make sure that we get all the questions on the video as well. Any questions?
Just curious, I have two questions. What percentage of websites now in the world or in America are compliant? And also, is it going to be almost cost prohibitive for a small company that deals locally, say, to redo their entire website to become compliant?
No. And again, most sites that are being done for SEO purposes are probably already doing many of these things. So depending on the functionality of the website, the work could range from $1,000 to $10,000, depending on what the website does. But it's really work that should be done for SEO, most of it anyway. In terms of what percentage of websites are compliant, I don't know that I've ever been exposed to that statistic. Ramsey, have you?
As you know, websites come up and come down regularly. It's very hard to quantify that, but I would say probably the lower percentage.
Yeah, I have read that 2 to 3% of all internet use is by people who use the screen reader software.
Okay, let me get to the mic.
Okay, you know on a website where it says accessibility, what is that?
On a website where it says accessibility.
You had mentioned that websites need to be accessible, explaining a little bit more about what that is, which really is what WCAG 2.0 compliance is all about, is making it more
Right.
accessible to everybody. So it's all those components.
They have a link on the website. It says accessibility. In fact, Google has something at the top when you go to Google that says if you're using a screen reader, click here.
Perfect. Yes, some websites will actually create another version of it that is just for the screen reader software. It'll convert modes. And there was a movement afoot a couple years ago to have an extension of your website. Back in the old days, remember when some people were doing a .mobi for a mobile version? There was a movement afoot to create a separate version of your website that was just accessible on a different version. That's not required by WCAG to have that separate and distinct version, but there are some sites that do that. So if you click on that button, then the content transforms itself to only be accessible by a screen reader software.
Matt Kempeach, excuse me. We use a lot of one-on-one, Vistaprint sites that I just throw up for different purposes. Do you see that as are they going to come up with a solution? Are they going to incorporate this in those types of websites, the format websites?
Wow, that's a great question. So if a popular CMS like one-on-one or WordPress, I think there's a business opportunity for them to do that, for someone to do it quickly. I've not read about anybody who has plans to do that. I think that the danger in trying to do that is they might say, we have a WCAG compliant backbone or template. The user still has the ability to modify those in a way that would make it non-compliant. So I think they might be a little leery of putting a sticker on it saying this is compliant, when at the end of the day, what might dictate it is the changes that the end user does to it. Great question.
How many sites would you say Roar has already done in WCAG 2.0 AA compliance?
About a half a dozen.
Dan O'Connell, board member of MOROF and ambassador chair. I'll lead this towards a question, but I think one of the problems in any industry probably, but particularly medical of late, is the orientation towards compliance or regulatory measures. But if you look at the real definition of marketing is really communication and making it simple and available to the wider range of people so that they understand what you're saying. So problem with compliance is it has a more punitive connotation. And then, so my question really is, the marketing of your practice or marketing of any business should be available and readable, accessible to anybody, it would seem to me. So how do we get into the more positive role of projecting, like you mentioned, Medicare or Medicaid oriented practice should be ahead of the curve because that's going to be more important to them. So please just give me, because I'm not technical, and I know you deal in the merging of technical with marketing. So how can you, address that?
I think if I understand your question, if you look at what's happened in the physical world, we didn't address the changes we made as being compliant. It's not a compliant restaurant. We call it an accessible restaurant, right? So I think that we probably need to adopt the same semantics. As businesses, we need to say, we're not doing this because we have to. We're doing this because we want to make this accessible to the widest range of population possible, in the same way we've done in the physical world.
Any other questions?
Well, thank you very much. I've enjoyed spending my morning with you.
Give a round warm